an introduction, a short introduction to Masechet Moed Katan. We'll say a few words about Chol Moed. There's an Isur Malach on Chol Moed, which is derived in the Gemara Chagig on Daf Yud Ches. Rashi here quotes the entire sugi from Chagig Yud Ches, about 5 lines down from the top. And there's a drasha. It says in the 16th parak of Sefer Dvarim, Sheishes Yomim Tochal Matzos, Ubiyom Hashvi Atzeres Lashem Elokecha Lo Saseh Malach. So the first part of this pasuk mentions the 6 days, the first 6 days of Pesach, and then the last part of the pasuk mentions the 7th day of Pesach, and it's called Atzeres Lo Sasu Bo Malach. And now we have a hekesh that since in the same pasuk it refers to the 6th and the 7th, just like the Torah spells out that the 7th is Asur B'Malach, Lo Taseh Malach, so too the other 6 are also Asur B'Malach. However, the Torah doesn't say exactly what's included in this Isur Malacha. Is it the entire constellation of all the 39 malachos? So really, in this case, the Torah gave authority to the Chachamim to define the scope of the Isur Malach on Chol Moed. And therefore, the Chachamim established that a Davra Ovid, for example, if you don't do this Malach on Chol Moed, you'll take a financial loss, whatever that means. And there's something called Tzorech HaMoed, like, for example, you're cooking something for the Moed, or perhaps you're preparing a garment. Then there's something called Tzorchei Aguf, there's Tzorchei Rabim, Tzorchei Mitzvah. I mean, there's a whole list of cases and categories where the Chachamim allowed you to do Malacha on Chol Moed. So we're going to focus our attention now, first and foremost, on what's called Davra of something that if I don't get involved in it, I'm going to suffer a financial loss. Mashkin Beis Hashlachim. Beis Hashlachim is a field that doesn't get enough rain to sustain it, like it's on a high plateau or on a mountain, and therefore we constantly have to irrigate it. And Mashkim, you're allowed to irrigate a Beis Hashlachim Bim Moed, even on Chol Moed. And now the Mishnah shifts over to another topic, and that's Shvius. During Shvius, we're not allowed to do malachos. One of the malachos that's prohibited on Shvius is called Zorea. And in a more general sense, Zorea includes anything that's improves the the produce, right? In other words, like watering something, even if the seed is already there. But in this case, where you're irrigating a field and the field cannot subsist on rainwater and it's going to dry up if you don't do the irrigation, then we're going to permit Hashkas Beis Hashlachim on Shvius. Now, what's the flip side of Beis Hashlachim? That's called a Beis Habal. It's going to come up in the Gemara, so we might as well mention it. And a Beis Habal is in a lower plateau, it's in an emek, valley or whatever it is. It's got plenty of rainwater, ample supply. And therefore, there's no pressing need to do an irrigation. And it seems from the Mishnah that the Mishnah is only permitting a Beis Hashalchim, a Shlachim, not a Beis Habal. Now the Mishnah adds, Bein mimayan sheyotza b'tchila, bein mimayan shelo yotza b'tchila. As far as irrigating the field, you can irrigate from one of two kinds of streams. One is a stream that yotza b'tchila means it's now the first time that this spring appears. And what that means is that the stream has not yet established its path, its pattern. And in the Hebrew, he writes, "Adayin lo nase kavua." It's not set. lehiluch mema, in terms of where the water is going to go. Because once it's already kavua, then the ground is already been, it's already been, so to speak, furrowed, and it's solid. So the big chiddush here in this Mishnah is that even though it's yatsa b'tchila, you're still allowed to spread, the ground, separate the ground in such a way that the water will irrigate your field. And we're not afraid that in this new stream that doesn't have a mokum kavua, it will collapse on you because it's not solid. And if it collapses on you, then you're going to have to get involved in what's called a great tircha. That's already prohibited. Okay, again, the concept of tircha is a complicated concept that's what we're going to learn here in this Masechet. But the chiddush of our Mishnah is that we're not afraid that there'll be some sort of collapse of the sand or the dirt, and you're going to have to be matriach yourself to dig a new furrow in order to draw the water through for your fields. Then it says, Bein mayin shelo yatsa b'tchila, which is an old mayan that is flowing for a long time, and it has a makom kavua. That's exactly where it always goes. So the question is obvious, and that's what the Gemara is going to raise. Why did the Mishnah have to bother telling me that? If you're telling me that even in the case of a mayan sheyatsa b'tchila, where it's not a mokum kavua v'lehiluch meimav, and there's certainly a chashash that you might have to do a tircha yisera if it collapses, how much more so goes without saying that we're going to allow you to irrigate a field from a well-established maya that's kavua and lehiluch meimav. So why did the Mishnah have to do that? Aval ein mashkin lo mimei geshamim v'lo mimei kilom. Okay, now let's say the rainwaters fall down. We're not talking a maya, some sort of natural spring where the water flows, but rather the water comes down and it gets collected in one place, possibly because that place is a little bit below ground level. And in this situation, we're not going to allow you to irrigate because this requires a tremendous amount of work. What you're going to have to do is you're going to have to go into this, this location where the Mei Geshama is collected, and you're going to have to dig out the water. Can you imagine how much work it is? Like one pail at a time. Probably they had a whole, a line of people. You pass it to him, and then he would pass it to you. For lo mimei kilom, what's mei kilom? Bar amok. It's a very deep pit. The yeshbo mei geshamim, and the water has collected there. So this is not a case where he deliberately created a cistern for the rainwater to fall into. This is a natural situation called mei kilon, and it's such a deep pit that over the course of time, during the rainy season, the rain gathered together in this pit, and the water line is rising over the time. And now he wants to use it by digging into this, this deep bar and drawing forth the water. That's already a tircha yisera. So again, it's very interesting. The borderline here between what you're allowed to do on Yom Tov, meaning Chol Moed, and what you're not allowed to do, meaning in what cases is it considered such a great tircha, it's a very ambiguous line. Where do you draw the line? Let me just see if by chance he adds anything. He says one may water an irrigated field. Okay. He writes to avoid irreparable damage to the crops. Whether it's a newly emerged spring and it hasn't begun to flow until just recently, or from a spring that is not newly emerged. He says, in the case of a newly emerged spring, the walls meaning of the flow, I call it the furrow, are not yet sturdy. And we might have had a fear, a chashash, that they'll collapse. And then a person, in order to restore them, he will have to perform repairs involving excessive exertion. Okay, now we have an English translation of the word tircha. Excessive exertion, 2 EXs, which even for an irrigated field is forbidden. And the Chiddush of the Mishnah is that any type of spring, whether it's newly emerged or of long standing, may be used. Okay. Now, Aval ein mashkin, one may not water even an irrigated field, neither from a pool of rainwater, nor from the water of a well. Rainwater refers to a pool of rainwater adjacent to a garden or a field. Okay, so that's called Mei Geshamim. And well water, which is called Mei Kilon, is water contained in a deep pit. And water in a deep pit requires a great deal of what word do we use? Excessive exertion, right? Requires exertion. He's going to have to use a pail, which is called in Hebrew a kilon, in order to bring the water up to the surface from this deep pit. So that's what we're saying. This is also on Moed and on Shvius because of Tircha Yisrael. V'ein osin ugios l'gefan. So they used to make ditches around the roots of the grapevines in order for the rainwater to collect in these ugios, which he calls gumos. Now I have a very important note here, which quotes a machlokes rishonim. When it says in our Mishnah, "V'lo mimei kilon, lo mimei geshamim," is that referring to Moed and only to Moed, or even to Shvius? And he quotes the Ran and other Rishonim who say that this Isur of lo ein mashkin, lo mimei geshamim, v'lo mimei kilon only applies to Moed, but it does not apply to Shvius. And why? Says the Ran, shetircha yisera ein asur b'shvius. The malach is awesome, but not tircha yisera. If there's no tircha yisera, I'm saying if there is tircha yisera, but there's no malacha, then it's mutter on shvius. So if, let's say, you had this mei kilon, where you're digging the pail into the well that's in the bottom of a deep pit in order to irrigate your beis hashlachim, that would be mutter on shvius, even though it's also on chol hamoed. Again, as we said before, osim ein osim ugios l'gefana. That's because of tircha yisir. Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah omer ein osim es ha'ama b'tchila b'moed u'b'shvius. So he translates the word amma as a ta'ala, which I say that I use the word a furrow. Let's see what he calls it. Probably has a better word than that. Where am I? Oh, he used the word canal. Okay, he's got an irrigation canal. So to dig a new irrigation canal, says Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, is possible. both on Moed and on Shvis. Now, why is it us on Shvis? We just finished saying, in the name of the Ran, that on Shvis is no Isur Tircha Yisrael. So Rashi says, "Mishenira ka'oder." Oder means when you hoe something or rake something, and that's prohibited on Shvius. And now it looks like he's doing ma'ader. The Chachamim Omrim, they disagree with Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah. Osenes ha'ama b'tchila b'shvius. And Rashi explains because the Chachamim lo chashashu shenireh ka'oder. Chachamim think that creating this canal is not similar to Oder. Ki Oder osa came with Sarach Zriya. The purpose of Oder is to prepare the ground for seeding, for planting, and therefore Chofer umachzir sa'ofer limkom. He digs, and then he puts the plant in, the seed in, and then he puts back the offer that he took out. But Osa Sa'ama, Chofer umatil es ha'ofer l'makom acher. He digs here and he shovels out the dirt to another place. So it's not at all similar to ma'adir, where you are going to use that very dirt to cover up the hole after you seed the ground. U'misaknin es ha'mekulkolos b'moed. If, let's say, you have this canal and some of the earth around the canal fell in, collapsed into the canal, and as a result, the canal became, what's the word in English? Not stuffed up. What do you call it? You get like a blockage, the flow of water. What word? Obstructed. So it becomes obstructed. And now, as a result of this obstruction, the water is not flowing. And the Chacham say, you're allowed to fix this up on Chol Moed, remove those obstructions. That's not considered extensive exertion. Is mutal l'takna b'chol Moed l'fi she'ein b'kach tircha yisera. Kol shkein shemutal l'takna b'shvius, where there is no Isur Tircha. However, if you notice, this is the case of mitaknim es hamikul kolos. What about a case of asiyas amas mayim bitchila? Let's say there is no canal, and you want to create the canal, then even the Chacham would agree that's awesome. That's already Tircha Yitzera. So again, if there's an obstruction in the canal, and you want to just remove the obstruction, and that's the tikkun that you're doing on Chol Moed, that you're allowed to do. U'misaknin es kilkule hamayim shebrishus harab. Let's just see what he's fixing up now. One may repair damaged cisterns. Right, a cistern is where the water collects in like a ditch, in the public domain. He says, if some of the stones that make up the walls of the cistern collapse into the cistern, they may be removed. Or alternatively, if these cisterns are cracked and dirt or sewage is seeping into these cracks and polluting the drinking water, they may be repaired for the sake of the community. So this, my friends, is another category that we mentioned that's mutar on Chol Moed, and that's called tzorchei harabim, the needs of the community. So again, we're clearing out these this dirt and sewage that's polluting the water. We can clear out pebbles or splinters. Right, and we clear it out. We're allowed to do, repairs of the roads, road repair. and street repair. It's interesting. You see these guys walking, working here, and you're trying to all over the place, the hard hats and all that stuff, and they're repairing the public thoroughfares. And if you would see that on Chol Moed, you would not expect it. There would be a Fruma Yid who's doing that work. But as far as I can tell, since it's for the benefit of the community, to remove all these pebbles and splinters that have fallen onto the roads, then I would say that's allowed on Chol Moed, even maybe even a mitzvah on Chol Moed. It's Sarchei Rabbin. U'mesachnin es ha'jochim es ha'chovos v'es mikvos ha'mayim. And once again, we're talking about a case where, let's say the mikveh doesn't have enough water, you need more rainwater, you need arbon sa. The osin called Sarchei Rabbin, and now the Mishnah gives you a general rule that includes all the above, which means that you're allowed to do malacha on Chol Moed for Sarchei Rabbin. And this is going to have to be some sort of reboot. The Gemara is going to ask, why did the Mishnah bother telling me that when we have all the cases here? There must be some case that's not listed in the Mishnah. U'mitzainin es hakvaros. Now, Tziyun Kever has a double meaning to it. First of all, it's in order to make sure that the Kohanim know that there's a Kever there, because a Kohen is not allowed to go near the Kever. Also, Tziyun is what we call a monument, a matzeva. I don't know if you've ever heard that there are people, again, it's not such a common minute, but it used to be back in the old days, they will create their own matzeva during their lifetime. Have you heard about it? It's supposed to be a school of Arichas Yom. But it's interesting, my parents are buried on Har Menuchos, and whenever I go up to Har Menuchos, I see, two kvarim, which are friends of my brother, childhood friends of my brother, and actually the parents of my brother's childhood friends. And I kept asking my brother, when did they die? And he kept telling me, I want your money. They're still alive. They have really prime, real estate there in Har Menuchos. Today, it's hard to get a place in Har Menuchos. Now they bury you, one layer on top of the other. So this is covered a mess, and you're allowed, and also for the Kohanim, so you're allowed to do that on Chol Moed. V'yotzim af ala kilayim. So what's kilayim? The Torah forbids the planting of two species together, to mix the species. And not only that, there's an Isur Kiyum kilayim. You're not allowed to even leave it in the ground. You have to rip it out of the ground. Let's say it was planted by a non-Jew or whatever. So what is the Mishnah coming to permit? He says agents of the court, of the Beis Din, would inspect the fields, and if they found kilayim, they would uproot the kilayim that they found. And that is the end of the Mishnah. So let's just start the Gemara. We have a few minutes. So the Gemara is the following: Hashta yesh lomer mimayin sheyotza b'tchila. Now that you're telling me that it's a brand new spring that emerged for the first time, and it hasn't yet created its own canal, and you're allowing, setting up the irrigation through such a mayan sheyotza b'tchila, and that is despite the fact that the osi in fule, it's very shayach that maybe, the walls of the spring would collapse. And that's going to force you to do a Turchi Yisera Mashke. Nevertheless, the Mishnah allows it on Chol Moed. Is mimayon shelo yatsa b'tchila. You have a mayon that is an old ancient mayon, the lo asil in fule, and there's no chashash that maybe the walls of the spring will collapse, of the canal will collapse. Boy, why did the Mishnah have to bother telling me that? The answer is Amri. we said the following. Itzer. If the Mishnah would limit itself to a case of a brand new spring, I would have said, Hachahu the Beis HaShalchin in Beis HaBaal Lo. Here's where the Mishnah limits it and only permits it to an irrigated field that is desperate for the water. And if you don't water it, you'll lose it might dry up and you'll never be able to resuscitate it. But if you have a Beis HaBaal, you remember I mentioned that a Beis HaBaal is the opposite of Beis HaShalchin. That's on a mountain. It's got plenty of, it's in a valley. It's got an abundance of water. And now it's got abundance of water. It doesn't need the irrigation. It's not a Dobrova. We're not going to allow you to do that on Chol Moed. Mishum the Osilin Pule. And here, we're only going to allow you because of the pressing need of a Beis HaShalchin. And other than the pressing need of Beis HaShalchin, if it's a field that doesn't require irrigation, namely a Beis HaBaal, we're not going to allow you to do that. And why not? Mishum the Osilin Fule. Right? We're afraid that the walls of the spring might collapse. But if you have a well-established spring that's been flowing for ages, we're not afraid that the walls will collapse. I might think, afilu beis habal nami, I could be matir, even in the case of a beis habal. But mashmalon, that's what the Mishnah says, Loshna mayin sheyotzim tchila, Loshna mayin lo yotze b'tchila, bein beis hashalchin in, beis habal lo. So the Mishnah wants to teach me that when we limit the heter to a case of a beis hashlachim, and we prohibit a beis habal, that applies both to a new mayon and to an old, well-established mayon. The Gemara asks, "Umay mashma da hai beis hashlachim lishna de tzachusahi." Tzachusa is like simaon, and the language of beis hashlachim means that it's thirsty for liquids, for moisture, because, as we said before, since it's on a mountain, it's not getting enough rainwater. So why do you call it a beis hashlachim? The Gemara seems to be focused on the etymology here, the meaning of the word. Tichsiv, and it's based on a pasuk in Dvarim, v'ata oyef v'yagea. This at the end of Parashas Kiteitzei, with regard to the attack of Amalek, they attacked us when we were exhausted. If we look in the Targum, it says v'at mashlehe v'loy. Now, I'm not sure what the word mashle means, but the word loy means to be exhausted. Leos is exhaustion. And he says here in the note that when it says mishalhe, that's the same as mishalche. And that's why it's called the beis hashalchin. The letters ches and he are interchangeable. The word shalhe in Targum Uklus means faint from thirst. And that's a beis hashalchin because since it's a field that requires irrigation, it's thirsty for moisture. It's fainting, so to speak, from moisture. And finally, Umayshna the high beis habal lichna the miyas vusahi. How do we know that the phrase beis habal means that it's satisfied with natural rainfall. It doesn't need any, human intervention of irrigation. The sieve, because the pasuk says in Yeshaya Navi, Ki of al bachur besula, u'metaginon arei b'ma dimitosa. Can you hear? U'metaginon arei kima dimisosa. What does that mean? He says, as a young man settles down with a girl who's never been married, so too your children will settle in you. A young man who marries a woman for the first time settles contently into his home, no longer wanders from place to place as he did when he was single. Okay, this is a message we have to give to some young men. So we're basically talking about a part of the land of Israel that's well settled. That you could be content because there's plenty of rainwater to supply for the Beis Haba. Okay, then that's where we're going to end for today. And tomorrow, Mr. Shem, we'll finish this up. Well, let's just make a note of where we got to. Yeah, here's where we got up to.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And if I don't see you, have a good Shabbos. It's hard to believe it's already Thursday.
Are you here on Shabbos?
Yes, I wasn't planning to be, but Rabbi Moed is still stuck with this bidud. So he asked me if I could come. So I might change my plans. My daughter was a little bit disappointed because she had gotten an apartment for us to stay in. All right, but the call of duty. Duty! Oh,
good soldier in the army of
soldier.
Okay, we're on Zoom tomorrow at some point?
Tomorrow on Zoom, yeah, probably the later time.
Good.
Yeah, okay, good. Seems like yesterday we started Megillah. This stuff, Yomi makes you aware of like the flow of time,
Yeah, 30 minutes. A lot of use of this.
A lot of
good extras.
Oh, to what? To Daf Yomi?
Yeah, something
like side benefits, like.